Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we're going to be talking about my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. The first one up is ActRaiser. This is a wonderful game. It's a multi-genre game where you do a little bit of side-scrolling platforming stuff, and then you go into my favorite part, which is the SimCity game, where you play as a little cherub and you're flying around killing bats and skulls and little demons and other bullshit that's flying at you. And you just get to interact with the people that live in the different regions of this world, and you're trying to lead them to the monster layers to get rid of them so you can go through another side-scrolling level and basically free the land of evil. It's awesome. All of that results in a boss rush mode at the very end of the game, which is pretty fun, but I don't like it as much. It is cool to see all of the bosses that you beat before, but I would have liked to have something else. Just one more stage would have been just fine with me. Aerobiz Supersonic is probably a weird entry on the list, but I really like these tycoon and business simulation games. I know it sounds weird to put it on a list of my favorite video games for the Super Nintendo with how many great games there are, but sometimes it's just really fun to sit back and build a little business empire and try to do your best to make the best possible company that you can. One of the great things I like about Koei's games is that you get to learn something while you're playing it. And I learned more about the airline industry than I knew before, so that's always a plus whenever you play something like this. It's just really fun to go through the different scenarios and try to figure out how to play the game, especially if you discovered it like me and you didn't have the manual to explain anything, so you just kind of had to guess. This was also in the early ages of the internet, so I couldn't really look up a lot of information on the game. I feel like Chrono Trigger is on most people's lists for best games for the Super Nintendo, so yeah, it wouldn't be that surprising that I have it on here. I really like Chrono Trigger. It was one of the games that I got introduced to when I was first getting into Super Nintendo, since I didn't have the system when I was growing up, and I had to go over to a friend's house to play it. Strangely, I only had one friend who really had a Super Nintendo, and everybody else had a Sega Genesis, so that was kind of odd. Chrono Trigger is a time-traveling adventure where you go around just solving people's problems and trying to figure out what the hell Lavos is and why it destroyed the planet. I feel like everybody already knows the plot to Chrono Trigger, but that pretty much sums all of it up. There is one thing I read in a book recently about it, and it's a very fair criticism of the game. Chrono, Marley, and Luca really don't have any reason for doing what they're doing. None of the events that take place in this game are really going to impact them that much, so they just kind of decide on a whim to save the world. And I never thought about that, because I was a kid when I played this, so why would I even think twice about it? Of course you're going to save the world. Out of all of the arcade-style shoot-'em-ups I've played over the years, the Darius series is one of my favorites, if not my favorite series. And Darius Twin is my favorite of the Darius series. Because you get to fight fish robots, that's really the only reason I like this. It's the same reason I like Biohazard Battle. I like the idea of either playing as a robotic fish or playing as some kind of a robotic bug, and then trying to defeat giant fish robots. I have no idea why, but I really enjoy it. I was going to put a Final Fight on this list, and I was just debating which one I wanted to put. I pretty much discounted the first one because it's single player only, and I went with Final Fight 2 because I really like the game. It's just fun. to like look at it and also to just think of all the weird things that are going on in this because I'm of the opinion that you're just running around beating up random people and they're defending themselves. I mean, this might be part of Mike Hagar's Get Out the Vote campaign. Either vote for me or I beat the shit out of you. So, I don't know. I just really like this game. It's a very competent beat 'em up, and it's just a ton of fun to run around punching people in the face. On any given day, Final Fantasy VI is my favorite game in the Final Fantasy series. It really depends on which one I've played last, really, whether it's 6 or 7. And yeah, I like both of them a lot. Since I played 6 recently, I'm going to say that's my favorite one in the series. Along with Chrono Trigger, this is one of the games that really introduced me to RPGs. I had played the first game in the series, but really didn't think too much of it. And then my friend Drew rented it for a weekend, and we played it together, and I really enjoyed it. Then later on in high school, when I finally got on the internet, I found the ROM of it, and I came pretty close to beating it, but I don't think I ever did back then. It wasn't until a few years later when I got the PS1 version that I was able to beat it. In this game, you play as a bunch of heroes who are trying to save the world, first from the evil empire and then from an evil wizard or mutant type person thing. I don't really know what Kafka is, but I know he wins, and then you have to go and beat him later. It's an awesome game. I was not expecting to put Pirates of the Dark Water on this list, but this is a really awesome beat 'em up. I really loved this one a lot when I played it a while ago when I was doing a review of just some random games. I remember really loving the cartoon series, and I remember collecting the comic books, even though they just sort of rehashed a couple of episodes from the series. But when I played this, it was so much fun, and it quickly became one of my favorite beat 'em ups on the system. It's not my favorite beat 'em up, but it's really close to it. It's a very standard beat 'em up that feels an awful lot like one of the Final Fight games. You play as one of three characters, you go through a bunch of stages, and you beat the crap out of pirates. It's a lot of fun. The AI in this for the enemies is pretty stupid, but that just adds to some of the humor of the game and makes it a lot more fun to play. Metal Marines is a strategy game that I was actually introduced to by my friend Andy way back in the early 90s. We played it as a demo on the PC and had no idea that it was ported over to the Super Nintendo until way later. Like, probably in the late 2000s, I found out it was on the Super Nintendo. I picked it up, and it's a really great version of the game, and it's just a ton of fun. The story for this game is kind of buck wild. It has to do with this evil empire moving into Earth, using a bunch of antimatter weapons to destroy most of the land surface on the planet, and then you, as either the colonies coming back to save Earth, or as just the defense force of Earth, have to try to defeat this evil empire. And you go around the world beating the crap out of them with either your giant robot mechs or your intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's amazing. Run Saber plays like Strider. If you like Strider, you're really gonna love Run Saber. It's a really great game. You play as a guy with essentially a lightsaber, and you run around a post-apocalyptic Earth, killing things in order to save the world. The story is really not important for this game. And I would argue for most of these games, the story is just completely pointless. Just have fun running around and slashing things with one of your lightsabers. You don't need to know why. Just do it. There are 5 levels in the game. Each level has a few mini bosses and one big boss in it. And your goal is to defeat this mad scientist who's turned the people of Earth into mutants or some such nonsense. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I didn't even bother to look up the story. I'm just going off of what I remember. It's still an amazing game, though. Turtles in Time is my favorite beat 'em up on the Super Nintendo. One, because it's the Ninja Turtles, and two, it was made back when Konami gave a shit about video games. And they made a really amazing one here. This is a very good port of the arcade game, which, like many of the Turtles games, I had no idea was actually in the arcades. This game has nothing to do with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game that was released in 1993, aside from both of them dealing with time travel, and this being good, and the movie being, I'm going to say mediocre, because I still enjoyed it when I was a kid. The Koei games really got me into history in general, and I think it's their fault that I went on to study history in college. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and blame them. Anyway, Uncharted Waters New Horizons is an awesome, I'm going to call it an RPG, but it doesn't really feel like one, depending on the story that you decide to follow. You play as one of several characters, and each character has their own storyline. For example, you can try to chart everything in the world or uncover the whole map, or you can try to, rebuild your reputation as a pirate, or you can become a privateer. You can do pretty much anything that the game allows. There's also a storyline where you become just a merchant. Much like Sid Meier's Pirates, it's a very open ended thing. There is a story for each character, but you don't really need to follow it. In my opinion, Tecmo Super Bowl 3 is the best version of Tecmo Super Bowl. It improves on all of the arcade football formula that was really running throughout these games, and it includes some features from Madden without trying to be like a realistic simulation of football. It still really just wants to be an arcade football game, and it's a ton of fun to play. It has both the NFL and the NFLPA licenses, so you've got the players' names in here. You can trade, you have free agency. There's a lot going on with this, but they leave out some things like the salary cap, so that doesn't really matter so much. And yeah, it can be fun to take a player who was pretty awful in the 90s and turn them into something amazing. Like making Scott Mitchell not suck. Hammerlock Wrestling is probably another weird entry on this list. And, well, I think that Saturday Night Slam Masters is the better game overall. I really like Hammerlock Wrestling, and since this is my favorite games, I'm putting this one on the list instead of Saturday Night Slam Masters. You have a bunch of different modes that you can play through. You pick a wrestler, and you just decide what you want to do in this game. It's like many of the other games from this period where there's no storyline and you just sort of go through the different matches. But Hammerlock Wrestling has a really cool visual style that you can see from just having cutscenes at the top and the bottom of the screen. And they're pretty well done. It's just an awesome looking game that looks very unique and can be a ton of fun to play. Sunset Riders is another fun game that was made by Koei back when Koei gave a shit. It's a ton of fun to play. I'm awful at it, but it's a lot of fun to play. You pick one of four different cowboys with different weapons, and you just move through the game shooting everything that runs onto the screen. It's pretty simple, but it's a ton of fun. Once you get to the boss fights, that's when it kind of gets a little bit more annoying. It feels like some of the levels in Contra where you have to switch to like oh gosh, almost like a vertical scrolling shooter, kind of, but you're just on a single screen. Those I don't like as much, but it's still a lot of fun to play a game like this every once in a while. And it's really cool to go and just try to get as far as you can in a game like this. Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen is my favorite game on the Super Nintendo. It's also my favorite RPG, and it's one of my favorite strategy games as well. In this game, you try to overthrow an evil empire that's taken over a continent. You have to defeat the evil empress. Once you defeat her, then you face the real bad person. And once you defeat him, then you need to defeat the demon that he summoned from the underworld that tries to take over the entire world. There's a lot of shit that goes on in this game. The first time you play through this, you're going to miss all kinds of crap, and you're probably going to get a bad ending. And that's okay, don't worry about it, because you can always play it again. It's a lot of fun, especially just trying to find everything in this game, figuring out how you're supposed to recruit the different characters that are all optional, and just trying to get the best ending you can. It's an amazing game, and I love it. So those 15 games are my favorite games on the Super Nintendo, but I've got more of them that I just didn't want to put on the list for one reason or another. Maybe I didn't have as many memories of playing them, or maybe I just enjoyed something else more than the ones that I left off this list. Many of these games I discovered when I was, out collecting games back in high school and also in the 2000s and that sort of thing. So some of the memories aren't necessarily of playing them, it's like finding the game and just enjoying it and sort of discovering something new that I didn't know about before. So that is my list. Let me know what some of your favorite Super Nintendo games are. It doesn't matter if they're popular or if they're just games that you like and no one else does. It's always fun to see everybody else's list because sometimes you find something that you might want to go back and look at, or maybe it's something you hadn't heard of before. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.